All right, so we're back in Photoshop now, and I'm going to go ahead down here and grab my type tool. And you'll notice that when I clicked on that, of course, it changed my options panel up here. And but there's another way that you can get this information so that it's not all just, stuck up here where it jumps up on top. You can also go over here to Window, and you can look for your character panel. All right, so go ahead and grab the character panel, and it'll automatically also open up your paragraph panel. And because all of my stuff right now, it looks like it's center based, I'm going to go ahead and type it using the center paragraph method. You could keep it left aligned or right aligned or whatever, but because I'm going to try to justify mine properly, I'm going to go ahead and just base it off of center. It might make it a little bit easier for me. I'm not, however, going to use this justify up here. I'm going to do my own spacing myself. So using, uh, kerning tracking stuff. Okay, so if I come back over to the character panel, I can tell it what I want it to be. The first thing that I want to do is make sure that it's at least large enough that I can see it. So if I start to type, I can type the word spire, right, and then I can highlight that and go and change the typeface to anything that I wish. And you can kind of play around with getting the right type size. Right now for, oops, I don't know what just happened. Let me go ahead and grab my character panel again. That happens to you. Um, and 167 points is probably not big enough. If I just do the drop down, you see it only goes to 72, so I'll constantly have to just be typing and guessing. So let's just see what 200 looks like. And I know that this isn't the typeface that I want, but I will go ahead and at least sort of move it down here. And you see that it's wanting to center it, which is good, so I can go ahead and put it there. It centers it on the document. And I know that that's not large enough. I could keep messing around with this type size, but I know that that's not the typeface I want. And sometimes if you, use the wrong typeface and you go crazy trying to get the point size right, it's all going to change anyway later when you get the typeface you do want. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to jump to the one that I know I want. And that's going to be this thing called, oops, I'm going to just type it because I know what it's called, but it's called Quantify. And you'll see here that it looks like this, and it's kind of hard to see with, let me go back to my layers and let's turn off the bottom layer, and you'll see what this looks like. And the reason I chose this is because it feels like a really tried and true sans serif. It has a certain kind of boldness and heft and weight that makes it so that it's going to be easy to read. It has a lot of clarity like a more traditional sans serif. However, you'll notice that it does something kind of interesting here. It's got these angles like in the P and the R and the E. And so some of the letter forms have this reference to this almost like mountain or rock edge feel. And I thought that that might be kind of interesting with what I'm trying to do. And what I'll also do is I'll take this background and I'm going to unlock it. And I'm going to just turn the opacity down a little bit so that I can at least sort of see general reference for, scale. I'll go back up here to my type and let's mess around with the type size again. I think that I might need to do this much, much larger. Let's try like 400 and see how that's a little too big maybe. I mean, it could be that big. I just want it to be in relationship kind of with the mountain, with the scale. So let's see what 300 looks like. And so you can kind of mess around with this, and I can always come back later and be a little bit more precise with this. Let's just try like maybe 310. See. Anyway, but yeah, I can kind of come around and mess with the size later, but I want to get a basic idea of how that looks. And so that might work. I'll use my nudge keys to kind of get that. I think that might work pretty well. And then the one that's down here, I had mentioned that I like the idea of having something that was like open and rounded. And so another one that I found that I liked was I think it's called Rounded Elegance. And by the way, I installed these on my computer. Oops, except that I don't want to do that. I actually want to type on a new line. And you could do this one of two ways. And the way I'm going to show you how to do this is instead of typing two separate lines, I'm going to have you go ahead and hit the return key and start to type the word outdoor, right? And then we can make it smaller here in a second. But I don't want to leave it the same typeface. I'm going to definitely make it much, much smaller. That's probably a little too small, but let's maybe see what 100 looks like. It might be somewhere in that ballpark. And this is kind of a nice looking typeface, but I don't think that I want these to be identical typefaces. You could do that depending on what it is that you're trying to do. But for what I'm doing, I think that this isn't going to scale well, and it almost makes it look like this U is a different, like it's two letter forms that are put together in some weird way. To me, if it scales too small, these little cuts and breaks, they might not look good. I think it'll be fine for this larger word where it says spire, because that won't ever scale so tiny that you can't tell the difference. At least I don't think it will. But anyway, so where it says outdoor, I'm going to go ahead and choose the, I think I mentioned rounded elegance, yeah. And so you can see the difference in like just the readability of this versus that other one. And I still think that these will work okay together. So we'll go outdoor adventures, okay. And this is a little bit too big, but because this is so open, I actually really think that this has a good proportion in the letter spacing, meaning literally the space between each letter. So I don't want to adjust that here. I mean, I could, like you'll see what would happen though if I started to pull it in tighter. It just makes it too tight, and that's what this VA little symbol is over here. It's just showing like a letter V and a letter A, how you might adjust those together because they naturally want to space apart. I'm going to leave that tracking at 0, and then I'm going to go ahead and just change the font size. Let's see maybe what 90 looks like on that. It's still a tiny bit big. Let's see how 80 goes. And that's starting to get better, but that's a little too small. And I don't really want to spread it out because I like the spacing that's in between on this particular font. And so somewhere between 80 and 85, let's try like 82, right? And that actually looks like it might do the trick in terms of being justified. It could even possibly go to 83, and that's where I might start messing with the tracking a little bit. Here, let me go back and let's do 83, and that might be okay. All right, and so this might work for me. I think I might be okay with that. And then if I go back to my layers, I can just turn that off and see how these things look together. And I think that that might be okay. And if I felt like these were too close together for some reason, you know, if I turn this on, you can see that Outdoor Adventures is a little bit lower. The other thing that I can do to adjust that is I'm going to go down here and I'll choose where it says Outdoor Adventures, and I can go where it's got the leading up here where it says auto, and I can adjust that. And traditionally, just so you have an understanding of what auto is typically going to be, it's going to automatically make it 120% of the type size. So if you wanted, for instance, to take a calculator and say what is say 1.2, if it's 120, 1.20 times 83 was the point size, then the automatic leading or line spacing would be about 99.6. So we need to make it taller than that if we want to move this down. And some people, you know, your automatic response might at first be to just put a character return, you know, like here, and just put another paragraph return. But that's not the correct way to do it when you're doing typographical stuff, right? So you would want to come here, let's say instead of 99.6 or 100 or whatever, we can try like, let's see what 103 looks like. And you see it moved it down just a little bit. Let's try like maybe 110, for instance. Let's do 110. And that's starting to get a little bit more in line with at least where my drawing was. And, you know, like I said before, I might not like it like that, but let's try that. And that's starting to look, I think, more like the actual drawing if that makes a difference to me, and I can turn this off. And I actually do like that spacing better. I think it opens it up a little bit and it gives me a little bit more opportunity to read this and have my eyes move around a little bit more. So it just really depends on what your goal is and what you think looks good. All right, so that's the beginning of the type stuff, right? And here's the deal. I didn't settle on these two. I actually, but for the sake of time, I'm not going through all the different iterations that I did. I did lots and lots of combinations before I decided on these two as a group together. I actually went through about 5 or 6 different typeface combinations. And some of them were combinations using the same sets of type. Like I think maybe I downloaded 5 total or 4 or 5 total different ones, including that one lemon milk I did try. And here's the deal. Let me show you something actually really quickly so that you can see. Like this word where it says spire, that isn't something that I could easily use, right? I couldn't easily use this as a typeface for headings all over my website. I might not want that. Like I said before, this little cut in the name, it might not scale well. So it's not like necessarily something I even would definitely want as a web font other than maybe using in the title. I might not ever want to put other headings in this. Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. But I do like it for the name. What I might do instead is find a typeface that would look very similar to this, but that would have a more traditional looking P, R, and E, so that maybe the letter forms are complete. And Lemon Milk was one I think that actually did a pretty good job of that. There's some other ones too, but you can find stuff that looks fairly similar to this in a more traditional way that you could use as your titles. That would be even something like a Google font that's web hosted, right? That's something to think about too. So those are some issues that you want to definitely think about. If we go back over here to layers, I can turn this back on and we could then move forward. Right now I'm just going to leave this as black. I think I like this for my type. And then in the next video, I'm going to talk about how to do this vector drawing up here.